Imagine a place that tells a story spanning centuries, where culture and nature intertwine to create something truly extraordinary. That's the beauty of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. I'm Abigail, and this is Global Treasures, the podcast that covers the history, travel tips, and legends surrounding one of the 1,223 World Heritage Sites each episode. These places have been identified as having universal cultural or natural significance that is so exceptional that it transcends national boundaries and is of importance to present and future generations. Welcome to Season 2, where we'll explore the 45 sites that UNESCO added in 1979 together. Thank you for listening to the Global Treasures podcast. We appreciate all of your support, and you can continue to support us by subscribing at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podbean, and please tell your friends about us. You can also follow us on TikTok, Clapper, and Facebook. Imagine the sun's rays beating down on you from all directions. You step off the noisy 21st century tour bus. Suddenly, you find yourself transported back in time thousands of years, to a time when Egyptian kings and queens ruled and were worshipped even. Welcome to the Nubian Monuments from Abu Simbel to Philae. Dawn breaks over Lake Nasser, its waters reflecting the first rays of sunlight across the Nubian desert. At the water's edge, 4 colossal figures emerge from the rock face, the steated statues of Ramses II, their eternal gaze fixed on the eastern horizon. For more than 3,000 years, these giants have guarded the great temple of Abu Simbel. But these aren't quite the same stones that Ramses II's artisans carved from the living rock. Every block, every carved relief, every grain of sandstone has been meticulously moved and reconstructed, lifted from the rising waters that threatened to submerge them forever. This is the story of not one, but 2 of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, separated by more than 3 millennia, yet bound together by our enduring drive to create monuments that outlast time itself. Welcome to the Nubian Monuments, where ancient wonder meets modern ingenuity in a tale of preservation against impossible odds. This site represents one of humanity's most ambitious cultural preservation efforts. Spanning the Nile from Aswan to the Sudanese border, this UNESCO World Heritage Site encompasses 10 remarkable components that together tell the story of ancient Egyptian civilization's relationship with Nubia. At its heart stand 2 crowning achievements: the Temples of Abu Simbel and the Sanctuary of Isis at Philae, both of which faced extinction beneath the rising waters of Lake Nasser. These monuments once served as more than mere temples. Each structure in the collection reveals a different facet of Egyptian-Nubian relations. From the grandeur of Abu Simbel, proclaimed Ramses II's might to all who ventured south, to the Temple of Isis at Philae, which remained an active religious site well into the Christian era. The site also includes the Temple of Amata, one of the oldest surviving structures in Nubia, the impressive Temple of Kalabsha, and the haunting ruins of the Monastery of St. Simeon, each adding their own chapter to this remarkable story. In the early 1960s, Egypt faced a crucial decision. The construction of the Aswan High Dam promised to transform the nation's economy through irrigation and hydroelectric power. But its completion would create Lake Nasser, a massive reservoir that would submerge many of Nubia's most precious monuments. What followed was one of the most remarkable archaeological rescue operations in history. Between 1964 and 1968, the temples of Abu Simbel were systematically dismantled into 1,036 blocks, each weighing between 20 and 30 tons. Like an impossibly complex 3-dimensional puzzle, Each block was carefully numbered, lifted, and transported to a new location. Engineers didn't just move the temples, they recreated their entire environment, building artificial hills to maintain the original appearance of the temples carved into living rock. Even more remarkably, they preserved the solar alignment that twice yearly sends the sun's rays into the innermost sanctuary to illuminate statues of the seated gods. The rescue of Philae presented different challenges. The island temple complex had already suffered periodic flooding after the construction of the first Aswan Dam in 1902. The solution was equally ambitious. The entire temple complex was dismantled into 40,000 pieces and reassembled on the higher ground of Agiliki Island, with the process lasting from 1977 to 1980. Every stone was cataloged, every relief photographed, every architectural detail measured to ensure perfect reconstruction. The original construction of these monuments was no less impressive than their modern relocation. Abu Simbel's Great Temple, dedicated to Ra Horakhti, Ptah, and Amun, as well as the deified Ramses II himself, was carved directly into the sandstone cliff face around 1264 BCE. The temple's facade, dominated by four seated colossi of Ramses II, each reaching a height of 20 meters, was designed to awe anyone approaching by river. This was architectural propaganda on an unprecedented scale, a permanent declaration of Egyptian power at the empire's southern frontier. Inside, the temple extends 61 meters into the cliff, its walls covered with reliefs depicting Ramses II's military victories, particularly the Battle of Kadesh. The temple's interior is a masterwork of ancient engineering, with a series of progressively smaller chambers, creating an illusion of infinite distance. The hypostyle wall features 8 massive pillars adorned with Osiris statues of the pharaoh, their eternal gaze following visitors as they move through the space. The smaller temple, dedicated to the goddess Hathor and Queen Nefertari, is equally remarkable for its time. It was one of the very few temples where a queen was depicted the same size as the pharaoh, signifying her importance. The Temple of Isis at Philae represents a different architectural tradition. Built during the Ptolemaic period on an island considered one of the burial places of Osiris, it combined Egyptian and Hellenistic elements in its design. Its most striking feature is the massive first pylon, decorated with reliefs showing Ptolemaic kings smiting their enemies, an ancient Egyptian motif adapted for new rulers. The temple complex includes the elegant kiosk of Trajan, with its 14 columns topped by elaborate floral capitals, and the temple of Hathor with its delicate relief carvings. But these famous monuments are just part of the story. The Temple of Amata, one of the oldest surviving structures in Nubia, showcases the architectural evolution of the new kingdom. Built during the 18th dynasty under Thutmose III and expanded by his son Amenhotep II, it features some of the finest relief work in Nubia, with colors still vivid after more than 3 millennia. The temple bears fascinating traces of a Amarna period. Careful observers can spot where the name of Amun was erased during Akhenaten's religious reforms and later restored. The Temple of Kalabsha, though built much later during the Roman period, demonstrates how Egyptian architectural traditions endured and adapted through time. Though never fully completed, it showed how Roman builders interpreted Egyptian sacred architecture. The temple's staircase to the roof offers insights into ancient astronomical observations and religious rituals. At Wadi Esebua, the site's sphinx-lined processional way creates a dramatic approach that builds anticipation as worshippers moved towards the inner sanctuary. These monuments weren't just displays of political power. They were living centers of religious and cultural life for thousands of years. The Temple of Isis at Philae was the last active site of ancient Egyptian religion, continuing to serve worshippers until the 6th century CE. Even after the rise of Christianity, when other temples were closed or converted to churches, special permission was granted for the Nubian people to continue worshipping Isis at Philae. This remarkable religious persistence speaks to the deep spiritual significance of the site and the power of the Isis cult in the ancient Nubian culture. The walls of Philae tell the story of Isis and Osiris in elaborate relief carvings, the divine drama of death and resurrection that captivated ancient worshippers and continues to fascinate visitors today. In these sacred spaces, priests perform daily rituals to sustain the goddess and maintain cosmic order. During major festivals, the statue of Isis would be carried by boat to visit the tomb of Osiris on neighboring Baija Island, a ceremony that drew thousands of pilgrims from across the ancient world. But the religious significance of these monuments evolved over time. When Christianity spread through the religion, the Temple of Amata became a church in the medieval period, its walls adorned with Coptic crosses painted alongside Egyptian hieroglyphs. At Philae, the Temple of Isis was transformed into a church dedicated to St. Stephen, with reliefs modified to reflect Christian imagery. The monastery of St. Simeon, built in the 7th century, displays architecture blending Coptic Christian needs with traditional Egyptian building techniques. Abu Simbel's religious significance was equally profound. Twice each year, on February 22nd and October 22nd, with the dates now shifted slightly due to the temple's relocation, the rising sun penetrates the entire length of the temple to illuminate the statues of Ra-Horaki, Amun, and the deified Ramses II in the inner sanctuary. Only the statue of Ptah, associated with the underworld, remains in darkness. This solar alignment, maintained even after the temple's relocation, demonstrates the sophisticated astronomical knowledge of ancient Egyptian architects and their deep understanding of solar theology. The smaller temple at Abu Simbel reveals another aspect of Egyptian religious life: the growing importance of royal women in religious ritual. Dedicated to Hathor, the goddess of love and music, and to Queen Nefertari, the temple's imagery shows the queen making offerings to the gods on equal footing with Ramesses II. This elevation of the queen to divine status represents a significant theological development in ancient Egyptian religion. The religious influence of these monuments extended far beyond their immediate vicinity. The cult of Isis, which found its last refuge at Philae, spread throughout the Roman Empire and influenced the development of early Christianity, particularly in the veneration of Mary. Even today, some scholars suggest that the ancient Egyptian feast of Sham el-Nessim, still celebrated in modern Egypt, has its roots in the religious traditions once practiced at Philae. Today, these monuments face new challenges. The very waters they were saved from continue to affect them through changes in humidity and salt crystallization. Climate change poses additional threats, with extreme temperature fluctuations stressing ancient stone that was never meant to endure such conditions. Yet these challenges have also spurred innovation in conservation techniques. The international cooperation that saved these monuments in the 1960s continues today through ongoing preservation efforts, archaeological research, and the development of new methods to protect ancient stone from modern environmental threats. Here's something remarkable. When Abu Simbel was rediscovered in 1813 by a Swiss explorer, it was almost completely buried in sand. This accidental preservation helped protect its vivid colors and delicate reliefs for centuries. when an Italian explorer finally managed to enter the temple just 4 years later. He found the interior decorations so well preserved that they appeared to have been carved just yesterday. This site holds other fascinating secrets. At the Temple of Kalapsha, visitors can find an inscription from 250 CE prohibiting pigs in the temple, one of the earliest known animal control ordinances. And at Philae, careful observers can spot where ancient Christians carefully chiseled away hieroglyphs they considered pagan, except for the figures of Horus, whom they associated with Jesus Christ. As the sun sets over Lake Nasser, casting long shadows across the reconstructed temples, it's worth remembering that every stone you see has been moved and replaced with precision that would have impressed even the ancient Egyptian architects. These monuments stand as testimony, not only to ancient engineering, but to modern determination to preserve our shared cultural heritage. Now, before you plan to visit these remarkable sites, let's talk about some of the things you should keep in mind as you're planning. If you're flying in from another country, you'll want to use Aswan Airport. You likely will have a stopover in Cairo and then have a 1.5-hour flight to Aswan. My understanding is you have to book a tour in order to see Abu Simbel. You can't just show up and buy a ticket on site for a self-guided or even guided tour. There are a wide variety of different types of tours available on booking sites, though. Honestly, this really is to your benefit, as you'll miss a lot of the context if you don't hear the history and importance from a tour guide, which likely will be an Egyptologist, someone who is an expert in Egyptian history and culture. The tours aren't cheap, but typically you'll either see Abu Simbel or Philae, though you can take a combination tour. Just know that these are long days, and when I say long, I mean at least an 8 to 12-hour day, if not more. I would argue it's totally worth it, especially since you'll be driven around in an air-conditioned bus with everything arranged for you. Again, book tours and accommodations early, as it's one of the most popular tourist sites in Egypt, drawing at least a couple hundred visitors daily. Also, keep in mind that the primary language is Arabic. While they often speak English at major tourist sites, it's still helpful to have someone who speaks it fluently guiding you. Outside the monuments, while you're in the area, you may want to visit the Aswan Botanical Garden, take a camel ride, or a motorboat ride to Philae. There are some hotel and dining options available once you're a bit away from the site, though you may want to ask your hotel or tour guide for suggestions. If you're interested in trying some more popular dishes, shawarma is a great introduction. It's a common street food. They take a meat like lamb, sometimes beef or chicken, and cook it on a spit, then slice it and serve it with flatbread and tahini or a yogurt sauce. If you're craving something sweet, baklava is truly special. It's a phyllo dough made with walnuts or pistachios and tons of honey. It is so decadent and addictive. Just make sure to have tea or coffee, as the bitter is a nice counterbalance to the sweetness. Just some tips I'll add to the mix. In terms of weather, it's generally between 80 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit between the months of March and November, with the temperature dropping to as low as 48 degrees Fahrenheit at night in December. If traveling during the summer months, make sure to pack sunscreen and dress modestly despite the heat. Cash may be preferred at markets, and the currency is the Egyptian pound. Tipping at restaurants and of tour guides is commonplace, though not required. Now, let's pivot and round out today's episode by talking about the steps being taken to make sure this site can continue to receive visitors into the future. We touched on some of the steps historically taken, but let's focus on what they're doing now. First off, this property is incredibly large and spread out. That in itself makes taking care of it expensive and time-consuming. The main issues the monuments face is due to the fact that they're adversely impacted by the wind, temperature changes, rain, humidity, and even bird droppings. Also, Even though tourism helps with the budget to upkeep the site, the negative impacts of over-tourism and visitation weigh heavily. Just a couple years ago, someone was arrested for trying to take one of the monuments. So when you visit, please be respectful and do not try to take anything with you as a souvenir. Despite the long-standing threat to their very existence, the Nubian monuments have survived and thrived. These monuments are a triumph and tribute to one of the most important parts of human history. In our next episode, we'll take you to a different part of the world, the old city of Dubrovnik in Croatia. Positioned on the Dalmatian coast, Dubrovnik was a key militaristic, political, and economic city, filled with sweeping architecture and a rich history. Until then, keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep treasuring the remarkable diversity of our world's heritage.